Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. I've got dad hair going on. New dad hair, I guess. So, let's get right into it. If you are watching the recording, please leave a comment to let me know that you watched later. But for those of you who are live, welcome. We're doing a new topic every week, and let's see what we can do up here. There we go. So today we're talking about how much cash you should really keep on hand. And, you know, most of us who just started out early in our careers, the problem was not having enough cash. And at a certain point, a new problem happens as your income grows and your career evolves. You could run into a new problem of having too much cash. So, just like anything, water, food, too little or too much of anything is sometimes not a good thing. So, we're going to mainly stick with talking about having too much cash and what you should do with that cash and why having too much cash might be an issue in your financial life. So, I've talked to so many people over the years who they've got six figures sometimes of cash. And it makes sense, right? Like I said before, we spend a lot of our early life sometimes worrying about money, trying to increase our income, and we want to save money for all different reasons, not only just for the future, but for the short term, but also out of fear sometimes as well, right? So, no matter why you've saved up all this money, we're going to talk about what you might want to do with it and see if we can reduce some of that fear that you might have, which is totally normal, especially in the world we live in and all the information that we're seeing about the world on a daily basis. And a lot of the content that you might be seeing out in the world that might be influencing you to feel scared about the world and what your future might hold. So it's totally normal to do this. And I'm certainly never going to recommend that you not have any cash. So let's get right into it. And if I didn't say this before, feel free to comment what state you're watching from. I'd love to see where people are tuning in from. So my name is Spencer List, for those of you who don't know me. And I was a former professional musician for well over a decade, almost 2 decades. And I was a master of saxophone and woodwinds, and I played at the highest level and enjoyed making a living performing for many years. Now I'm a holistic financial life planner for music executives. I'm a small talk and holiday cynic. I think the holiday thing comes from my birthday being 5 minutes before Christmas. And I'm also caffeine free, so if you want to get coffee, we can do that, but I won't be ordering a coffee. Nothing against it, but hopefully we can still be friends. Once I did quit music professionally, it was all consuming. My other interests that I had always I had more time for them. So I do enjoy woodworking, and I did play hockey growing up. So I follow hockey whenever I get the chance to. MF Doom is my favorite artist, and I'm a husband and new father of a 5.5-month-old at this point. Every time I do these lives or webinars, baby gets a little bit older, so it's kind of cool to remind myself that time goes by quickly. So you're seeing a new father. This is what it looks like. So why is someone like me, a former professional musician, teaching financial literacy and have an independent financial planning firm for music executives? It's mainly because of this screenshot, which is my bank statement from August of 2015. We're approaching the 10-year mark of this date. And I'll do the short story this time. I was making a living performing. Um, I really I was living my dream. I'd always wanted to perform professionally and make a living doing it. And I was playing at the highest level. I'd just come off playing with a few household names, which were interesting experiences. Recorded on dozens of albums and just did everything you can think of. And after coming home from a tour, I looked at my bank account and I had $67 to my name. You can actually see on there's one deposit from the tour and 44 withdrawals. So I was spending money, not so much making it on this particular run. And it was the summer of 2015 in Texas, which is where I'm from. And I was just in my rental home. It was like $300 a month. It was just a rundown house that I found in Dallas. It was over 100 degrees. I was miserable. And I had just spent my entire life working towards this dream that ended up, I had nothing to show for it. My net worth was neutral at this point. I really had no assets other than my instruments. And, my financial future really at this point didn't exist. And I felt vulnerable and scared and unworthy. There's a lot of identity wrapped around being a musician. And so I had a lot of questions for myself. And I remember telling myself in that moment, I never want to feel this way again. And no one else should. This is ridiculous that this is the norm, that people are financially illiterate or just financially struggling in the music industry. So I started learning everything I could about financial literacy for myself, just self-taught books and podcasts. And within 18 months, I built up an emergency fund. My income increased. I started saving into a retirement account for the first time and actually bought my first property. So a lot changed in a short amount of time just by learning some of the basics. And that curiosity led me to learn more and more and start teaching my music community through a podcast, newsletter, blog, speaking engagements. And then the curiosity kept going, and I ended up taking the professional coursework to become a certified financial planner, and eventually starting my own firm for music executives. I still give free financial literacy education and pro bono sessions to musicians facing financial hardship. So I do give back a lot of my knowledge as much as I can. But yeah, I guess that ended up being the long version of the story of why I'm talking about these topics, because I rarely see anyone discussing personal finance in the music industry. And at the same time, I feel lonely in that effort as well. So I'm hoping other people join as well, because I can't teach everyone. I can't help everyone. Okay, so disclaimer, this information is educational only. There is no personalized financial or tax advice here. I don't know your personal situation. So no advice, only take this as a learning opportunity. Okay, so cash hoarding. So we might have cash under the mattress. We might have cash in a shoebox. We might have cash in the garage. We might just have a ton of cash in our checking account. And so we might be hoarding cash. So we might be getting big bonuses or RSUs or tax events, and your cash flow might be lumpy throughout the year. So you get these big inflows of cash, and they just sort of go to your checking, and they don't really do anything. Another reason you might be holding on to too much cash is your fear, right? Not only market volatility, but just like I mentioned before, the world is a scary place, and the more information we have about what's going on in the world makes it more scary, and a lot of the content we might be seeing on different platforms or media outlets don't really help these days. So it's normal to want to hold on to cash when you're feeling uncertain and feeling the fear of your future. But there are hidden costs, one of them being inflation. And so the cost of goods and services are always rising. That's inflation. So when you have $100 today and you can go buy X, Y, and Z for $100, next year you're going to need $103 to buy those same goods and services, right? So by holding cash, everything's getting more expensive, but you have the same amount of cash under your mattress or in your checking account, wherever it's sitting. So we at least want to try to outpace inflation. So earning a return on your cash that is equal to inflation is just breaking even, right? So anything below that, technically, we are losing money in the form of purchasing power. Technically, the number, the dollar amount that you have is not decreasing, but you can't buy as many things, right? So you're not getting as much value for that money. And if you're just joining us, please feel free to comment where you're watching from, what state you're in. I'd love to see where you're tuning in from, and welcome. Thanks for joining. And if you did just join, this is recorded, so you'll be able to go back and watch the beginning. But we just got started, so I was just telling my story before this of why I'm doing this. So the cost of excess cash. Okay, so typically in your checking account at your bank, checking and savings accounts at your local bank or a big bank is usually 0.01%. I mean, basically, you're not making any money on your cash in those accounts. And like I mentioned before, annual inflation, it varies year by year, but on average, 2 to 3%. I usually assume 3% in my assumptions. So if your cash is not growing at 2 to 3%, everything else is getting more expensive by 2 to 3% every year, and that cash is just sitting still. And then we compare it to average historical stock market returns are about 8 to 10%. And just to clarify there, that does not mean that stock market returns are 8 to 10% every year. Sometimes they're higher than that. Sometimes they're lower than that, a lot lower. Just the average over the long term averages out to about 8 to 10%. And feel free to ask your questions in the comments as well. And when I see them, I will answer them. There's a little bit of a delay, but I'll be looking for that. So what to do with your cash? A 3-bucket system is a simple way to think about this. A portion of your cash should go to long-term growth, like your brokerage account or different retirement funds, maybe an HSA, an IRA, 401k, 403b, 457. There's all kinds of qualified retirement accounts. I've done plenty of talks about those, and I'll be doing more in the future about where to invest your money in a tax-efficient way. But think about one bucket is, what do you want that money to be doing for you in the future? When do you want that money? When do you need to live off of that money? Or you might have things 10, 15, 20 years down the road that you know are coming that you want to plan for. And then, of course, the big one, of course, is retirement, whenever that's right for you. Another bucket is short-term savings. So emergency funds, maybe a sinking fund for travel. You might have some new expenses coming up. Like for us, we just had a new baby. So we knew that there were going to be childcare expenses coming at a certain date. So we started saving for that well in advance of our baby being born, right? You might have other short-term savings goals that you want to do. It might be buying something new. Who knows? You might be planning to move. Think about your cash in terms of what cash should stay cash and what cash should be invested for the long term. A good rule of thumb is to start with is about 5 years. If you know you're going to need that cash in the next 5 years, then it's likely not the best move to invest it, because investing takes a long time to compound and get those average historical returns. And so anything shorter than 5 years, if you invest that money, it's subject to really big market swings. And if it's something like a down payment on a home, that's what you're saving for in the next 5 years, and it's time to go to closing and write the check for the down payment, but all that money's invested, and all of a sudden something crazy happens that day, and your funds drop below the amount you need for the down payment, that's not going to be a fun day for you, your family, or anyone involved in that transaction, right? And then the third bucket is immediate access. So just having a buffer in your checking. So for those of you who just have too much in your checking, this is something where you can have some in there, right? Some people like to have a month, maybe 2 months of just your monthly bills and expenses. Just looking at what your cash flow is on a regular basis and figuring out what feels comfortable for you to have in there as a cushion, to bridge the gap of, more new income flowing into the checking, and then just your regular payments for life. So those are the three buckets: your long-term growth, investing, short-term savings, and then immediate access, just what you need right now on an ongoing basis. So how much should you put where? That certainly depends on your situation, your goals, your values, your priorities. The answer is it always depends. But here's an example of someone who's decided they want to keep 15% of their cash in their checking. They want to keep 35% and put it towards high yield savings account for their emergency fund and for their short-term savings goals, so that they can earn more than, at or above inflation. And then about half of all that extra cash they had, they wanted to put into investing for the future. So this will just depend on a lot of different factors, and this will look different for each of you. So here's an actual strategy. So we want to look at, when do your RSUs vest? If you have any other executive compensation or bonuses, when are your taxes due? All of these big money flows in and out, what time of year do those happen, right? We want to be prepared for those. And then we want to be prepared for what we're going to do when those moments happen, right? So we're going to think about all that in advance. And then we need to understand our actual cash flow. I have a lot of tools on this on my website that you can learn about this and figure this out for yourself. But what are your actual monthly expenses? And what do you want your emergency fund to be? What's your goal there? Because if you already have your emergency fund, well, then we don't need to worry about that anymore, right? But if you don't, we need to work towards building that. Set target allocations. So if you are expecting maybe some big lump sums throughout the year, we can say, okay, let's look like that pie chart that I had before. 50% of that big bonus you already have decided is going to go towards your long-term investments, or whatever you end up deciding. But you end up deciding in advance in a logical state, so that you're not deciding in an emotional state when that moment happens, right? Because money is incredibly emotional. It's really easy to get caught up in the feelings of, look at all this money I just got. Let me go buy a boat. Now, that's not to say you can't go buy a boat and that you shouldn't buy a boat, but we really want to make objective, neutral decisions in advance with our money. And then when the time comes, you implement the plan that you already put in place, right? And then automatic rebalancing. So this is just to schedule regular reviews, just setting a reminder for yourself. And you can also, I talked about this in a live stream recently, that you can set up automatic transfers for certain things. And I just wrote a blog about what you should and shouldn't automate as well. So here's a case study. This is a VP who had $150,000 in checking, earning 0.01%. They had a lot of anxiety about market timing. They didn't know when they should put money into the market for the long term. And especially with the world the way things are, they just weren't sure, so they just did nothing. They didn't take any action. So their money was losing value to inflation each year. It's just sitting there, right? Things are getting more expensive, and that $150,000 is just losing purchasing power year over year. So what we decided was $25K was going to stay in checking. It was about 2 months of expenses. $50K went to their high yield savings account for emergencies, and they have a sinking fund for travel. And the high yield savings funds, at the time of this recording, I think they're still around 4%. So a little bit higher than inflation. And then the rest which was about half, $75,000 they invested in their brokerage account. In this scenario, they had already maxed out their 401k, their IRA, and all the qualified retirement accounts. They did their HSA. So they're at the point where they're ready to start investing in a taxable brokerage account so that they can start working towards early retirement. So instead of the 150K just sitting there, they experienced a lot of financial growth, right? They had the high yield savings account that earned interest. Then their investments are starting to grow. They reduce their financial anxiety, right? There's no more market timing. There's a plan in place of when we're going to invest, how often, how much, and it's all automated. No emotions at all. And they had a clear strategy for future income events. So they knew that when the bonus comes, when the RSUs vest, whatever it is that's going on income-wise, they didn't have to think about it every time. They knew what the plan was. They knew what to do. They click the button on the mouse, and it's done. So your next steps, you need to audit your cash. Look at all of your accounts and what interest are you earning on those cash accounts. And then let's calculate your numbers. What are your monthly expenses? What do you need for your emergency fund? And then think about where do you want to put that cash? Into long-term investments, short-term savings, or keep it in your checking for your ongoing expenses. And then set a reminder for yourself. It may be every quarter, maybe it's every month. I wouldn't necessarily recommend every day or every week because you're busy. And we just don't need to be thinking about our money that frequently. But set a reminder for yourself to check in on different things, right? Especially when you have like an RSU vesting or a bonus coming in, or when taxes are due. Set yourself a reminder. And you can do it with your computer, on your phone, whatever it is. So feel free to ask your questions in the comments. Hopefully I can see them. And if you want to learn more about motif planning, I'm a flat fee, advice only, holistic financial life planner. So I'm a little bit different than some of the other planners in this industry, but I don't take commissions. I don't sell products. I don't manage your assets. I do give investment advice, but I share a screen with you and show you how to invest your own assets. And that's why I just do a flat fee. I don't charge a percent of assets, and I don't have asset minimums either. And I'm holistic. So obviously we talk about your investments, but we talk about everything about your life: cash flow, insurance, investments, retirement, estate planning, major life decisions, employee benefits, executive compensation, your money psychology. There's so many factors of your financial life that go beyond just your investments. So we're definitely going to be talking about those. And so feel free to schedule a free consultation at motifplanning.com. Happy to answer your questions. Just get to know you, learn more about your story. And if you want to learn more or stay connected, you can go to my website. I've got a lot more resources, blogs, tools. You can follow me at Spencer List, mainly on LinkedIn, but I'm everywhere else. I'm posting a video every day, doing a live stream every week. I've got multiple blogs a week, a newsletter. So you can subscribe to my newsletter. That's on my website. And feel free to email me, spencer@motifplanning.com. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question publicly, I totally understand. You can just send me an email, and I'm happy to answer it. So I know there's a little bit of a delay. So what I'm going to do is I have an outro with some of my music playing. And so, but I'll still be here. So if you put a question in the chat, I will see it and I'll respond to it there. And I hope you all have a great day. See you next time.